with the front end branches connecting the branch to the back office, including providing scanning capabilities and making everything electronic, to changing the way Scotia bankers work. We've introduced activity-based working and really created remote capabilities for all users within Scotiabank in the buildings downtown. And lately, I've been working on voice projects where we're connecting users, moving them from hard phones to soft phones, and creating on-net calling.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the introduction, Deepak. Second panelist is also going to be sharing a great presentation with us today. Please welcome Mr. Wayne King.
Thanks, Ade. Yep, I'm Wayne King. I'm president of InfoMedia Systems Group, and I'll be giving a short presentation in about a minute. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've been in the IT industry for about 34 years. Believe it or not. I've worked for small companies, large companies, including Xerox, IBM. And I've worked on some interesting projects as far as technology that you use every day, such as Exchange, and used to be like Lotus Notes and some content management stuff as well. So right now what we're doing is we have a nice consulting firm based in Ottawa and Toronto, and we specialize in cloud solutions.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Wayne. So we will be transitioning into the presentation. At some point, we will have collaborate and more chit chat around some of the interesting items that will be presented by Wayne King. Back to you, Wayne.
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. And then we'll get started on the presentation. Sorry, I just need to pull this up. Can you guys see the screen?
I can see your screen, Wayne.
Okay. All right. Just my computer is acting up. I can't see it.
Okay, just before you get started, Wayne, I just want to do some few housekeeping. Just wanted to mention to the audience, we strongly encourage, we want this webinar to be as interactive as possible. So please send your questions through the chat room. And our recommendation is that you send your questions to all participants. So it sort of encourages more interactive conversation. But then if you're not comfortable sending to all participants, feel free to send it to the panelists. Back to you, Wayne.
Okay, great. I can see it now. This is great. So what I wanted to talk to you about tonight is empowering remote work. And what I wanted to do is we typically would talk about empowering remote work for remote workers, but I thought it would be a good idea to talk about it from the business perspective and from the worker perspective. So first, what I want to do is tell you a little bit about InfoMedia Systems Group. We're a cloud solutions and consulting firm. We've been around since about 2006. And we have a professional team of certified specialists for all of the solutions that we deal with in basically 2 locations, Ottawa and Toronto. So what we do, basically we specialize in business class productivity solutions. And what we mean by that is, say, like Office 365, VoIP and unified communication solutions. So like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Cisco, etc. Cybersecurity solutions. And what we're really proud of is last week we launched our online training service. So basically it's online training for business software. So that's ready to go right now, and we're really proud about that. So let's just get into it, and let's start with on the business side. Okay, so COVID-19 has caused basically an extreme shift in our workforce, where remote work, which was once a very small percentage of the workforce, is now the majority, and I can see it staying the majority for some time to come. So this represents a number of challenges to business, not the least of which is how to protect your workers and how to protect your data. So we thought we'd go through some of the basics that businesses have to consider. So when we're looking at the basics, the first consideration from a business standpoint is how are you going to have your workers work remotely? So there's a number of different ways of doing it, such as VPNs, cloud, virtual desktops, et cetera. It really depends on the business. Each business will have their own solution, which is right for them. And then once you've decided on how the workers are going to work, you now have to figure out if you have the proper tools that they can do this work. So the big four things that we typically look at are internet, phone, the computer, and the software. Those are the big things that people typically tend to look at. And then there are some things which typically get overlooked. So when we're looking at the things that are overlooked, one of the things is actually training. So the training that your users would have received on-site or on-premise on the tools and processes may not, when they work remotely, may not be you may not be working with the same tools or the same processes. They're going to probably going to have to be trained. So that's something to be very aware of. Security. So the security protocols that you have on site, the security protocols that you have remotely, again, are going to be different. You have to prepare for different types of security hazards. So one of the things is bad actors. So when you're looking at people working remotely, they're now more susceptible to things like people attacking their workstations, people trying to phish them through their email, that type of thing. So we now have to, from a corporate perspective, look at security at a much different light. So what we also typically recommend to a lot of the corporations, especially in the small to medium space, is your backups now become ultra important. So if possible, don't just back up the data, but back up your whole PC, especially if it's a PC that you've given your remote worker. That way, if something happens like ransomware or whatever, you can quickly recover from that. When we get to support, again, your support procedures, now that your workers are remote, probably have to change. You can't walk down to someone's office and look at their PC anymore. You're going to have something where you can actually remotely access it. So support is something that you have to work around as well. And policies. We recommend a remote access policy between the company and the workers. What this allows is you now have, with the policy, you now know the company and the workers now know what they're actually responsible for. And it avoids some conflict which may occur. Okay, so now we get to the working from home and the considerations for the people who are actually working from home. So what I've done is we've set this up as like a checklist, and I'm just going to go through the checklist and just give you a very brief description of some of the things that we think are that we generally recommend. So one, when we get talking about a workspace, what we tend to say is find a workspace that is comfortable and productive. So you want to find somewhere within your remote space, your home, wherever, that you feel comfortable working in and where you're not going to have too many interruptions. Once you have that once you have that comfortable workspace, you want to communicate often with your team. So now that you're working remotely, your schedule is not going to be the same schedule as you had it in the office. You're going to have interruptions. If you've got kids, the kids are going to interrupt. If you've got, people coming to your home, all sorts of stuff. So what we recommend is communicate your schedule to your team so they know when is the best time to reach you, because there may just be times when you just can't communicate to the team. Maintain healthy boundaries. So what we mean by this is make sure to take breaks and unplug during the day. One of the things that we feel is very important is that you have to maintain your health. One, for yourself, and then two, your productivity will decline if you're not being healthy. So staring at a computer screen for 4 or 5 hours is probably not the best thing for your health and for your productivity. So we recommend getting up, unplugging, go out, if you want, go to the gym or something, but take those breaks, make sure that you maintain something that's healthy. Embrace online meetings. So online meetings allow your team members to join from wherever they are. We recommend connect face-to-face with video. That helps maintain that human connection that you may not have if you just are talking just with audio. Be mindful and inclusive. Again, what we mean by that is online meetings can sometimes become crowded and make it difficult for people to share their opinions. So what we want is for people to share their opinions. So we recommend pause frequently, let people talk, let everyone share their opinion, and also remind attendees to use the chat window. That way they can chat amongst themselves or chat to the group and share their opinions that way. The last 3 points, basically they work together. Oh, sorry, I missed record your meetings. So record your meetings so that team members who weren't there, because again, we're talking about weird schedules now, can watch the results of your meeting afterwards. Okay. And then when we get to the last 3 points, they tend to work together. So what we find is working remotely can be a bit isolating. So what we recommend is find ways of bringing your whole team together and encourage fun activities and maintain some morale. An example of this is I can actually take my wife's company. So they do once a week, they do like a general meeting, which is nothing really about work, and it's a costume meeting. And they have awards for the best costume. Things like that. Okay. So now we get to where we get the most questions on the basic home setup considerations. I've talked about your workspace already. So yeah, comfortable and somewhere that you feel good working. Your home network. We actually think that a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on their network. So when we talk about this to remote workers, typically they say, I got this great download speed from my provider, but there's 2 things to think about here. Not just a download speed, so that's you getting the information, but also your upload speed, because now you're sharing information, you're sharing video, you're sharing audio through your network. So it has to be able to handle that. So what we typically recommend is check that you're with your provider, or if you already know that you have a good download speed, just make sure that you have a good upload speed as well. Your computer, we typically recommend to people get a late model computer. And what I mean by that is a computer between no older than say 5 or 6 years old, if you want to take advantage of some of the newer features and functionalities of some of the software that you will be using. So like we're using Zoom right now. Some of the functionalities for Zoom, you actually do need a fairly recent computer if you want to take advantage of some of those functionalities. So if you can see Pamela, the projected background that she's using is one of those functionalities. Your phone is something that you should really take a good, really consider how you want to handle your phone. There's a number of things that you want to do, whether you want to use your cell phone, your home phone, if you still have a home phone, if you have a soft phone through your computer, and then you want to factor in how how you tend to work. So if you're someone who tends to walk around a lot, typically a soft phone and your computer is not going to be the best thing because you'll be walking around with your computer. So that's something to think about. And then on the right hand of this slide are things that people tend to know they need, but they don't know how important they are. So let's start with the headset. The headset is really, really important. You want to get a headset which is one, noise canceling speakers, so that when you're hearing people talk, you're not hearing the background noise, and a noise canceling microphone. So what that means is that when you talk into the microphone, all they hear is your voice, and they don't hear any of the background noise of where you may happen to be. There are a number of headsets in the market. They're probably pretty hard to find right now, find a good one anyhow, but they are available. Your camera, you want to have a good camera. The $10 or $20 camera that you can pick up from like the local computer store probably isn't going to cut it. It'll be really grainy. You won't be able to see people's expressions, that type of thing. It's a good thing to invest in a half decent camera. So one that does like very simple HD camera, does 1080p, and you're going to be pretty good. Your monitor, again, this is something people tend to neglect. What we recommend is you get as big a monitor as you're comfortable with and that you can afford. That way you have more room to actually do your work and see everything that's going on. What we tend to recommend also is that if you can, get dual monitors. So within our company, everyone has 2 monitors. So if we're working on, say remotely in a meeting, it's on one monitor, and we can be working on documents and stuff on our second monitor. And then the last point we have here is your printer. So your typical home printer which is used to print off your kids' reports may not be good enough. We typically tend to recommend a good multifunction printer. If you're going to be working from home, so if you're receiving or sending documents to clients or teammates, etc., receiving documents by email, you want to be able to not only say print documents, but you want to be able to scan documents, sign them, send them back, that type of thing. It's much more professional than actually, I know I have some clients who actually print them off and take pictures with their iPhone or something. It's much better professionally just to go with a better printer. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put up some additional resources. So these are resources that we have available from InfoMedia that you can, if you just want to contact us, we can shoot them over to you. Anything from like a sample remote access policy document to training videos, free training videos, etc., and things like that. And that's it. Thank you. That's the end of the presentation. I think we can move on to the.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Wayne. Pamela Gordon, do you have some housekeeping?
Thank you so much, Wayne, for your informative presentation. I really enjoyed it. You probably noticed I made a few notes myself, some pointers as well. So in terms of housekeeping, I'd just like to remind you all, please feel free to use the chat, put your questions in the chat. You can direct your questions to the panelists individually, or you can just put it in the general chat as well. And we really, really want you to join in with this discussion. We want to hear from you. So we do have a few questions to start off with. Ade, would you like to introduce those questions?
Actually, I was hoping that, okay, yeah, I think the first one, I can take on the first one. I think one of the first questions is actually the one I have on the top of my list here. Thank you for raising that question, Fidel. I know Fidel and I go back a long way. So the question is around burnout. And I think this is one of the biggest questions when it comes to remote work. Most folks I've been talking to today talk about working longer hours than they used to prior to COVID, and which is pretty interesting because today we don't have to factor in commute time. You know, when you're working from home, you don't have to worry about commuting, which saves you enough time to get the job done. But then we find that folks are working till 7 p.m. Folks are working till 9 p.m. So what's going on? So, and I think some of the things that is really interesting to point out is the fact that we've got employers that have been affected by COVID. We've got employers that have been affected that have the economic impact, perhaps leading to layoffs. We've got situations where there are reduced resources. So hence, you might lead to more people taking on workload. And then we've got employees, perhaps if you're a consultant, you can relate to this more, thinking about job security and, leading to the need for them to prove themselves. So my question to you, Wayne, is twofold. What sort of advice would you have for employers, when they find themselves in that sort of situation, and also for employees, how do you strategically ensure that you're delivering at the same time you're avoiding burnout? That's to you, Wayne. I think you're on mute.
Thanks. So there's a couple of things there. So I touched about it in the presentation a little bit. So from an employer standpoint, they're going to have what we tend to recommend when people start working remotely is that they understand that the processes and the thought and the culture has to change a bit within the organization. So I know a lot of organizations are, they're used to micromanaging. The micromanaging isn't going to work. It has to go more towards a deliverable based. So if you say, if you're used to like being over your employee's shoulder, and it's not going to work because they're not there. But what you have to start moving the culture towards is, I need this proposal by Friday. I don't care when you work on it, but I just need it by this date, right? And then, then you can evaluate them on, did they meet their deliverable or did they not meet their deliverable, right? And not that they put in 7.5 hours a day, because it has to now become more of a deliverable based thing. From a worker perspective, to avoid burnout, what we recommend, again, I touched on that a little bit, is don't think you have to be at your desk or in front of your computer for 8 hours straight, right? That doesn't work. You're not, even if you're in your office, you weren't in front of your computer for 8 hours straight. So it's just easier. Like I even do this myself. I'll get up, and instead of having a set time to start work, I might roll out of bed and I'll start work at 5:30, right? Which is not good. But then a couple hours later, I'm like, I should take a break. But I know what you can do from a worker perspective is actually set up a schedule saying, every day I'm going to start work at this time and I'm going to finish by this time. Or I'm going to maybe take a longer work day, but I'm going to take more breaks in between. I might go to the gym at lunch. I might do something like that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Wayne. Deepak, do you care to share your opinion and thoughts around the topic?
Yeah, no, I think Wayne hit the nail on the head there. Made a lot of good points. The only thing I would add is you really need to know yourself. When you're going to be the most effective. So if you're the most effective in the evening or later on, plan your day and plan your work around that. So like Wayne mentioned, you don't need to do your work throughout that day. It is becoming more of a deliverables based work environment. So if you're knowing yourself and you work better later on, do what works for you for the most part. Take your time off. You still have your vacation days. I know I've been more busier in the last little while than I have in the last few years, but you still have those vacation days. Take those vacation days, and you really need that time to recharge. So make sure you do that as well. And you know what? Reach out to your manager, reach out to the people that you report to, and the people that you work with, because they're going through the same thing as well, and they understand. So don't be afraid to ask for help if you need.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Deepak. Well, looks like we've got quite a number of questions here. We've got some questions in the Q&A. We've got some questions in the chat as well. Pamela Gordon, do you care to share the next question?
Yeah, so next question is from Renee. This question is to Wayne. So what about the infrastructure of the organization, says Renee, security, bandwidth, etc. We've seen instances where the staff has a great connection, but the VPN connection is crappy. And the IT staff of the organization kept pushing back that it's the client's connection. The connection is on fiber and symmetric. So
Okay.
over to you, Wayne, if you understand that one.
I understand it. I'm going to answer very quickly, and then I'm going to give an example. So when on my first company slide there, when I said you have to figure out how you're going to work remotely, and I had like VPN, cloud, etc. That's one of the things I'm talking about. So one of the things that a company has to do, one, is evaluate their existing infrastructure and say, can we handle this? And they have to be honest with themselves, whether they can handle it or not. And if it turns out they thought they could handle it and they can't, they should have some contingency plan saying, you know, we couldn't do this and we're going to do it another way. From them blaming the clients, unless they're going to go and spend time there, they should just, you know, accept the fact that most people nowadays have a broadband connection, and from a personal standpoint, that's what you're going to get. So you have to deal with it. So from an example standpoint, I'm going to give it from one of the government departments here in Ottawa. They had basically they had their entire 5,000 plus people going through their VPN to access basically their email and stuff internally, even though they were running a Microsoft cloud solution. So they're basically going inside and back outside. Their VPN did not hold up. So their contingency plan was they actually had a secondary configuration where they connected to these applications directly. And that was one way of making it work. But yeah, it's from an infrastructure perspective, it's something you have to evaluate. And if you're not going to make it, then you have to have like secondary plans around that.
Okay.
Great, thank you very much for your answer, Wayne. Over to you, Deepak. I wonder if you can tell us how Scotia's handling this and elaborate a little bit more on this.
Hey, Pamela, if I can quickly jump in before Deepak. Deepak, I just want to add a bit of a layer to that question. We've been experiencing the reverse of the case. And when you find situations where employees on the call have to drop off on the call because they have a poor connectivity. And we know that we've talked about some of the tools and resources that are being provided by the bank. They provide you a laptop, they provide you, perhaps it might provide you headsets and the softwares, etc. When it comes to the internet, how do you deal with issues like that? And again, in addition to the VPN issues, do you mind sharing some thoughts?
Sure. So there's a lot of factors that go into ensuring that the connectivity is solid. Now I know from the bank's perspective, the infrastructure we had put in for VPN, we were able to increase significantly in a very short period of time. So from VPN perspective, we were able to manage, but we were able to manage on our side, but the carriers that we had providing us the services weren't able to keep up with the demand. So it wasn't just on the Scotiabank side, but the carriers as well. Not only that, it's also going to depend on the type of equipment you're using. So the type of laptops you have and how old and how outdated your laptops are, to the version of the tools that you're using. So Skype has multiple versions of it, and what we find within the bank is not everybody has the same. So you're dealing with different types and different versions of it. So there's there's different layers to that question. It can be quite complicated. It may seem like an issue with Skype, but it may not be Skype because it could be a hardware issue. It could be a VPN issue. You really need to know your environment and be able to narrow down root cause. Most part.
Great.
Perfect. Back to you, Pamela.
Fantastic. Right, so my next question is from Maggie. I'll put this to you, Wayne, as well, firstly. Do you recommend speaking with insurance providers to modify home, car or other policies due to changes in work and personal movement?
I'm smiling because my wife is a insurance provider.
Oh,
So
great.
she does home and auto. So yeah, I recommend it.
Right, fantastic.
Sorry, Deepak, she works for RBC. Yeah, there are a number of different initiatives that the insurance providers actually have right now to deal with like changes in work and personal movement. Some are offering rebates, some are reclassifying your cars. So reclassifying it to personal use instead of commuting, like business, that type of thing. So yeah, I do recommend speaking with your insurance provider.
Great, thank you very much for that. And Deepak, would you like to try and answer that one?
Sure. So even before COVID, I was actually on the work from home program prior to that. Probably working at least 2 or 3 times a week from home. So it wasn't the biggest change for myself and my team, my department. But that being said, one of the conditions or one of the items that we did need to take a look at was our insurance and provide proof that we have insurance stating that we are working from home. So there is a different policy that's out there in terms of home insurance that you should ensure that you have covered.
Great, interesting. Okay. So over to you, Ade. I know you do have some more questions. And please, everyone, please keep your questions coming in the chat. You can either give your questions directly to the individual panelists or just to keep it in the general chat, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Perfect.
Don't forget, there is a poll coming up as well soon as well. Look out for that poll.
I think the poll already went out, Pamela.
Oh, it did. So, I missed it.
So, folks, we do recommend that you participate in the poll. This would help inform our next webinar. And again, Pamela, we have a few more questions in the chat. Before we get into those questions, I'm going to try my best to quickly wrap things up here. I have one that's quite pressing in terms of security. This is a twofold question. This is one that you, as an employer, you think about security data. Now, when you're working, you can tell who's in the office. Now, you were working virtually. You don't know who's in the back of that virtual background. We have different people using virtual background. We don't know who's behind the PC. So, so from an employer standpoint, what sort of measures do you need to put in place to ensure that there's some certain security measures to protect your data? Now, there's a twofold, and I'm going to go to the employee standpoint. From an employee standpoint, how do you ensure that, how do you stay informed to know that you need to ensure that you're protecting yourself and you're protecting your job? And what sort of advice would you have? And this is going to you first, Deepak. What sort of advice would you have for folks out there that are working with the banks? And we know some of the security measures that have been put in place post-COVID. And I just want your thoughts around those questions.
So in terms of security measures and that, we've got a pretty locked down image where we're restricted, and that's already set up through the GPOs that security pushes out there, where we're not able to go to certain areas and certain sites. That being said, we're not able to use any other device other than a bank provided device as well. So generally, for at least from the Scotiabank perspective, all of that is locked down, and the security really holds that tight, and they have a whole department area set up in focusing just on security itself too. So honestly, within the bank, they have that locked down.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Mr. Wayne, I'm going to kind of put a twist to this as well. I've seen situations where employees send out an email to their personal email, because at Olade Consulting, we have a lot of consultants, and we get situations where someone gets an email from compliance around the fact that they forwarded an email to their personal email. They've done that previously without any concerns. Now, you're doing that today, and you realize there's some measures. And again, I'd like you to speak to the concept of from an employer standpoint, because we have some business owners on the call that want to know what sort of security measures do they need to put in place, and also if you can speak to the employee standpoint.
Okay, so from an employer standpoint, if you're looking for, if you're looking at businesses like say small to medium businesses, some of the security measures that you're looking at, because I'm saying small to medium because the bigger businesses like the banks, they'll have their own staff, which will be able to lock stuff and everything else. It's usually your small and medium businesses where this is more of a concern and which stuff is just not locked. So there's a number of things you can do. If they're intent on doing it themselves, you have to look at so many different areas, but the big ones would be, antivirus, ransomware tools, that type of thing. From what we typically recommend is if they can afford it, they go with like a managed service for security, in which they're actually monitored by a third party. So it's almost like the bank's internal security, but it's a service being provided to them. So there are a number of managed service providers. We do some of that as well, in which they set up like either a security operations center or network operations center. They're actually monitoring your users' PCs, whether they're remote or whether they're on site. If something happens, they take care of it like right away, right? That's the typical thing that we recommend. One good thing that example is one of the ransomware video that we can distribute. In that video, it shows a hacker breaking into Office 365 in less than 5 minutes and locking someone's PC. So, as part of the end of that presentation, basically what he says is, from a corporate perspective, if you don't have your own internal security guys doing this, get an MSP to do it. Or, make sure that you're doing backups like nonstop. And, don't back up just your data, back up your PC so that say, you do get hit by ransomware. You can basically just reformat your PC, download your backup, put the image back on, and, you've lost an hour, that type of thing. From a user perspective, yeah, users do have some responsibility for security, right? So any of the things that you wouldn't be allowed to do in the office, you shouldn't be doing at home. So if it's corporate business, use your corporate email. I know some people like using their personal email better, but sorry, it's business, use your corporate email, because they will have some of the security stuff built in as far as, scanning for ransomware, scanning for viruses, that type of thing. If you're using your own equipment and you're not using the company's equipment, again, you should probably you will be responsible for like making sure there's an antivirus, a current antivirus on your machine, that type of thing.
Okay.
And that's sorry, just one more thing. That's one of the reasons we say remote access policy is usually pretty good, because then the company and the user knows exactly what they're responsible for.
Great. So we've got quite a few questions, and I am actually aware of time here as well. So I'm going to quickly run through some questions, and we'll have to have some short answers, folks. Sorry about this, but the first question, I think we've answered this already, but this comes from Olade. Do you foresee working from home being more regular when things get back to normal? So if we can, tackle this one very quickly. Wayne?
Yeah, I do believe it's going to be more regular. A lot of companies who didn't believe that they could, accomplish stuff remotely have figured out that, yeah, having their workers work remotely has in some cases actually increased their productivity.
Great. And Deepak as well, as a
Yeah,
home worker?
yeah, and definitely, and I think the bank was already moving towards that direction. Although the bank differed department by department, but this is really going to push each of the departments to go down that route because it is a significant savings as well, even for the bank from a real estate perspective in that.
Yeah.
So I believe a lot of a lot of companies are going to go towards that route.
Oh,
And
excellent.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Deepak.
was just going to say that showing that productivity hasn't dropped that much. We're still getting work done. The bank is still continuing to work. So that being said, why not save the additional costing on real estate in that?
Right, excellent. So next question from Laundry. How do you facilitate highly complex, emotionally charged conversations when people are not face to face? This is a good one.
Which one?
Over to Deepak. I think we'll
Sure,
start you off. Give Wayne a
sure.
break.
And I think this is where video really counts for a lot, and to have that face-to-face interaction, you get to read reactions off of people as you're having that conversation, whether it be good or bad, or just being able to read their facial expressions counts for a lot. And we really push to have video on at all times, just to have that connection.
And Wayne?
I think Deepak's, hit the nail right in the head.
Right, excellent. So moving along to the next question, and I'm not leaving you out, Ade, so if you want to interject at any point, you can do. I'm just aware of time. So what's your advice on keeping team members motivated and engaged during these times? So I think you mentioned something your wife was doing, Wayne. If you can just elaborate on a few other things.
Oh yeah, so what they do is they try and lighten it up a bit. They try and keep that camaraderie together. So, I have some clients, they have a weekly Scrabble tournament. I know my wife's team, they have a weekly costume meeting, that type of thing, where you're still doing business but you're keeping the morale up.
And Deepak, are you doing anything differently at Scotiabank?
Well, I think that's kind of what you're limited to, and we're doing exactly the same thing where we're actually just doing like 15-minute huddles, so it's not a long duration, either in the morning or the afternoon, and it's multiple times throughout the week, where we just meet for 15 minutes. Because we're meeting multiple times, one would be about work and issues or anything that you're having in that sense, and the other one would be non-work related, what's happening in your personal life, and that as well. So you kind of keep that connection with your team.
Right, so another question I've actually got here. Thank you very much for that answer, Deepak and Wayne. For someone who is taking on a net new role that starts off remote, what are some of the tools, collaboration tactics they can use to establish themselves within the organization?
Okay. You want me to start there?
Yes,
and
please.
when I'm just going to I like to just throw a little bit of twist to the question. And we're talking about onboarding.
Yeah, always a twist.
And this is sort of, we're talking about virtual onboarding. Mm-hmm. And now this is something that it's an era that we're living in. We're thinking for employer standpoint and employees, we have to virtually onboard people. And this also touches on culture. And I think we're going to touch on that. I just want to be mindful of the fact that this is a virtual onboarding topic. And I'll get back to the old culture situation after this. So Wayne, you may respond.
Okay. So from a virtual onboarding thing, what tends to work is if you have a set procedure for the virtual onboarding, in which it could just be a series of emails. One is, welcome to the company. Another one would be, here's a set of things that you have to do. And it could even be an application, right? Where, you send them an email and they just sort of check it off as they go. And once they're done, you get that feedback, that type of thing. I know there's a number of companies who are using tools like say Microsoft Teams, where you can actually build that in as part of a workflow application within the Teams program itself, and to onboard them into Teams and to get them used to the tool, that type of thing. So one of their tasks could actually be, here's some stuff to get you started in Teams, even though they're already using it, that type of thing. From the other end of the question, so from what someone who has a net new role, tools, collaboration tactics. Some of the tools, use whatever tools that the company is providing you, of course. So if you have the collaboration tools, get to know them very well. The big one now, Teams, get to know that very well. Collaboration tactics. Some of the best ones, as we mentioned, were communicate a lot, right? So you want to communicate, you want people to know what your schedule are. You want, besides the communication, you want, use the video. Sorry, I'm trying to be brief, but there's just so many things to this. Collaboration tactics, the online presence, use that. That's probably going to be more useful than email, right? So use the presence, use the chat, and use the meeting functionality.
Awesome. And Deepak, I just want to touch on this. And I think the key word here is establish yourself. How do you, when you're in a net new role virtually, how do you establish yourself? Now, keep in mind, from an employer standpoint, if you're onboarding someone net new to your team, how do you ensure that your culture, because when you're onboarding someone new into your environment, they can feel the culture. Now, it's all virtual. How can you speak to the concept of a net new person? What sort of measures you want to put in place to ensure that they're well established and also they understand your culture?
So we've actually onboarded a few new people as well. That was done completely virtually. Even the equipment, the laptop, and the bank-owned devices was shipped directly to their house. So there was no interaction, no coming into the office to pick up any equipment or anything like that. So there was no physical interaction with the person. But being the bank, we're very heavy process oriented. And especially being in project management, there's a lot of documentation and a lot of processes that need to be followed. We actually have different SMEs and different people within the group that are specialized in certain areas and certain processes within the bank. So that's one way for that person to reach out to the different people within the group to talk about the certain process that person's an expert on, and kind of gives them a touch and feel of who's within the bank. And then within the department, within the teams, we have multiple department meetings, we have multiple team meetings, and it's really just voice as much as you can, work as hard as you can, and moving to a deliverable based environment. It's going to be more about what you deliver and what you can do, as opposed to being in front facing and in front of people for the most part.
Great, fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Deepak. Now, I've got Nora. She asks, how does the time affect looking for a job or change of work? So would you like to answer that, Wayne?
Well, I'm just sort of trying to understand the question a bit. How does the time affect?
Yeah, I think what she means
I think I can speak
this
to that,
COVID-19 time,
Okay.
if you're looking for a job now, how do you go about it possibly, or should you change your job now?
I would try and keep as regular as possible. So if you were wanting to look for a job before COVID-19, keep looking. I think the ways that you're looking, some of the tools you're going to have to use are maybe a bit different. So some of the virtual job sites, take advantage of some of these firms which actually go and look for jobs for you. and be prepared for online interviews. So you're going to have interviews over an online meeting tool. It's not going to be face-to-face, so just be prepared for that.
Great.
Yeah, and that's from the employer's perspective as well. So this is something new from the other side, from the employer side is too, right? So they're used to having face-to-face, but that's not the case anymore. That's not the time we're in. So it's new from their end as well. So just be mindful of that. And
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Ade, have you got any more questions? Hopefully I haven't missed anything. So I think we've addressed most of the questions in the chat. Oops. Let me see. I think another question has just come up there. Let me just see.
You want to go on, Pamela?
Right. So Mike's just put a question in. In all of your opinions, how long COVID's impact would stay on the job market? That's what Mike's asking. So in your opinion, how long do you think this is going to impact the job market, COVID-19?
COVID-19 by itself, I think, is going to impact the market for the next couple of years. Even once things start getting back to normal, human nature is going to be a bit more conservative. People are actually going to be wanting to work from home for the next while. I think you're going to have a longer term impact. And then from a corporate perspective, a lot of the companies are realizing, you know, I can have people work from home and it's saving me money.
Yeah.
You know, so the impact can be substantial for quite a while.
Great. And Deepak, what are your feelings?
Yeah, even when we say return back to normal, that's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a slow process. Even from a corporation perspective, as people start going back to work, they're not going to open up the building and allow that many people within the elevators, and especially being in the towers downtown. I think they're going to have to look at it department by department, and it's going to take a while for everything to return to normal, if it even does return to fully normal. But I think they're going to take more advantage of the work from home processes and the ability to work from home as we move forward.
Ade,
can you also address this as well from Olade's perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things that we've been telling folks is around, if you're switching jobs right now, you want to make yourself competitive by improving your skill sets. You want to take on those professional courses because right now, today, employers are going to set some. It's a supplier's market. Back in the day, prior to COVID, we have the candidates choosing between jobs. Now it's a situation where employers are looking at different candidates and they're looking for the different skill sets that will separate one candidate from another candidate. Now, if you're on the market as well, we also recommend that you use your network. LinkedIn is always a good network to talk to people. One thing you want to do is be able to get access to opportunities that are not necessarily on the job market. So your networks, you have managers working in different roles. Your connection with hiring manager gives you a better chance of employment. And lastly, I'll say contact Olade. We do provide employment placement services. We have tools and strategies that provides our candidate the advantage over the average candidates out there. We feel like when we put you out there, if you're a candidate with Olade, we feel like your chances of securing employment or getting in front of an employer is about 50% higher than the average person. So I would say contact Olade. You can reach out to us at admin@oladeconsulting.com or info@oladeconsulting.com. At this point, we are a little over time. We're going to be wrapping things up, and I'm just going to reach out to you, to the panelists. First of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating. All the participants, we thank you for joining. We thank you, panelists. Pamela, thank you for the fantastic job of moderating this webinar. Again, we're looking forward to your participation in the polls. It would help inform our next webinar. So before we wrap things up, I just want to reach out to the panelists. Final thoughts, or perhaps if you have any information you want to share with the audience, how they can contact you, how they can reach you. So I'll go with you first, Wayne.
Oh, so you can reach me at wayne.king@infomediagroup.ca. So yeah, feel free to reach out at any point. Our website is www.infomediagroup.ca. My final thought is basically everyone try and stay safe. That's about it.
Okay, thank you so much. Deepak?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ade. Yeah, so I can be reached at Bhangu, bhangu.deepak@gmail.com. Final thoughts. I think really this is going to be a marathon. It's not a sprint. So really pace yourself. And it is new to everybody. So not only for employees, but also for the employers as well. So just keep that in mind, and do the best that you can. Stay safe.
Okay, Pamela?
Great. My final thoughts. I've been working from home for over 26 years now, and I think this is the new way forward. Finally, more home workers. So, you know, my thoughts are, don't worry, the jobs are out there. Look for a job. You will be interviewed. You can be interviewed online. Look worldwide now. Look internationally, I would say to you as well. So just don't stay in Canada. There are jobs all over the world. So look worldwide and stay safe. And good luck with your employment if you are looking. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well,
Thank you,
again,
Ade.
thank you so much, Pamela. So again, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for joining us tonight. We thank you. Again, we want you to follow us, stay informed with what we're doing. Follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. We'll be happy to share more information regarding our next and upcoming webinars. So thank you everyone, and stay safe, and bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stay safe.